Hi, welcome back to another episode of SEO on Air. I'm your host Aaron, and today we have Joshua White, CEO of Neon Treehouse. Today we talk about the significant changes in the realm of social media, the do's and don'ts that marketers should adhere to, and the most effective SEO strategies for 2024. I hope you enjoyed this episode. So I'll take an example from your book itself, and I was going to say that I am a band in India, let's say,
Yeah.
and you are trying to help me with my social media presence. One question that I can ask is that what would you think are some of the common mistakes that you would normally see me make?
Yeah. So I think bands when they're like I think because there's so many different elements to a band. It's like, it's the aesthetic, it's the sound, it's the people, it's the fans. In and amongst everything else, there's a narrative in those four things alone. And I think a lot of people try to they try to showcase this sort of online, especially like, I'm just essentially going to be an influencer who's part of a band. So I'm going to try to create this whole, image online where I'm like, like loved and, famed on everything. But then people jump into your Spotify and see that you've got, one song and a couple of listens, like, so I think it's kind of talking to where you are, and bringing people along on that narrative. I think a lot of people don't spend enough time focusing on fan engagement at those early stages as well. Being able to do stuff really early on to get people involved. If you're doing shows and people are coming, bringing people into that, not just I'm performing for you, but I'm creating an experience for you and everyone in this room, and bringing people on it as part of that journey, in a couple of different ways. I think adding a bit more of that into the product that you're bringing to those shows also allows people to experience more than just a stand show, which means they're going to talk about it more, which means you're going to get more virality and more of those sorts of things, and therefore see more people, having more of a long-term, ongoing sort of enjoyment of your music, more than just, I saw this band once, I've forgotten who they were, but it was at this location. Like you're trying to create something, an experience that they hold on to for a longer period of time. And I think it comes down to, like, there's a lot. I'm not actually sure where this saying comes from, but they say, if you have 1,000 fans, you're guaranteed to make it, essentially. This is in anything. This is in business. This is in, personal achievement. This is in anything. So for a band to think about it that way, it's like, okay, so I don't need necessarily, 1 million people to just hear me today. That's not necessarily what's required. Who are my 1,000 fans, and what do they do? Hopefully one of those fans is someone at a radio station. Hopefully some of those fans are people at venues who can help me get access to gigs. I'll need some people in that 1,000 to be people who come to all my shows. I'll need some of those 1,000 people to have had, be really, people who just sing from the rooftops over what they had for breakfast. I need a couple of those people too, to have a really strong affinity to what I do. We've got a client of ours here. They don't, where they've got, what's the name of the guy who is the UFC fighter? The really famous UFC fighter. Sorry, I'm not.
Conor McGregor.
Conor McGregor, that's the one. Sorry, I'm not much of a fighter, guys. But these guys were telling me that, so they make board shorts, and Conor McGregor wears their board shorts, but he will never talk about them because he doesn't pay. They don't pay. Well, this is at the time that he was telling me about this story. I don't know whether it's changed since, but he will never mention them or tag them in their posts because he doesn't pay for the sponsored opportunity. But their brand goes crazy just in him kind of posting and showing this sort of stuff and people looking for it, because he obviously loves the product. So it's like, even just that is enough to get them a bit of exposure on what they do, right? So yeah, I sort of look at that and I think, like, who are your fans? Like, if you think about those 1,000 fans, who are they and what parts do they support and what I do, to kind of help me get there, rather than simply the vanity metrics around, I've got 3 million 3 million views on YouTube. I've seen lots of bands where they just pay a bucket load of money on YouTube to get viewership, and then say, see, look at this video, I've got 50,000 listens on it. It's like, well, that's great, but you've only got one and it's not repeated, and most of your other videos you only have 3 people who've watched it. So it's about, I suppose, not trying to over engineer it, and focus more on those 1,000 people who can be of the greatest value. So that's how I'd be looking at it. So yeah. In terms of socials and things like that too, I think a lot of people tend to just focus on achievements, but actually, I think one of the other parts that people need to consider is just the journey. What shows are you headed to? What places are you going to? Are you visiting fans in these different places? Showing people the journey of your recordings, talking to people about the sound and what it means to you. There's so much in the story outside of just, hey, we're playing this place. Hey, we're playing that place. Hey, we're doing this. Hey, we're doing that. I think that just makes it really hard for people to, get more around the story of the brand, and just keeps them really focused on, do I like that song specifically? Just for its sound and nothing around the story? Yes, no. Will I listen to it more than once? Yes, no. Well, that makes it entirely about the craft and who can produce the catchiest song. That's where pop, is a big part of it. But if it's more about, the story and the narrative around the band and their alignment to that, and, what they see amongst it, I think people will start to, blanket enjoy the music for what it stands for, or the band for what it stands for. And I think that's how you get more followers, just bringing them along for the journey and not overselling it.
And this kind of does seem like a full job in itself. Because if I was part of the band and I am kind of organizing my gigs, along with my manager, of course, and kind of, having those practice nights where you need to have at least 2-3 nights before the actual gig takes place. How does one then focus on the social media side of things while also focusing on, the actual going on of the band?
Yeah, I think, a lot of the time, if you have to really, really think about social, you are going to struggle through this a little bit, where it's like, I'm not thinking about what I need, or I'm not sticking to, I do, I look for these 4 things in my day, and when they happen, I take shots, or I do a video of this, right? If I see this, I post about it. If you can get yourself into a rhythm where every time this happens, it's like a knee-jerk reaction, to the point where it's like, I'm not even thinking about it. The knee just moves. If you can get it to that point, you will find yourself in a position where it's not going to feel so hard. I've got, I see a lot of people on social media where they're posting, they're posting online 8 to 12 times a day, just personally, especially for those people who are, social natives, or they've been using, Snapchat, TikTok, Be Real, those sorts of platforms from the get-go. And that's been their social, that's been their digital life, right? It's going to feel a lot easier to post content around that. But if it's not something that you're sort of used to from the start, I'd be starting by saying, don't worry about the content being perfect. Focus on identifying a time when it would be good to post, and not trying to over engineer stuff. Just be like, oh, it'd be great to get something on this. I'm just going to post it immediately. And then allow yourself to get to a point where, your first shot was shit, and that's fine. That happens. Your second shot, not so good. Your 100th shot, getting pretty good, but it's not about every shot from the start to the end being perfect. It's about, giving yourself space to fail a bit. And in the early days, who's going to see your first post? Do you know what I mean? Just put it out there on the basis that no one's looking, and allow yourself to get a feel for it, but most of all, make it a habit. I think at that point, it's not going to feel like an extra thing you need to fit into your day. It's just going to be it's going to be like breathing, or talking, or saying thank you for your
becomes
coffee.
muscle memory.
Muscle memory, spot on. Yeah.
After a while, you kind of lose, let's say, the creative spark for whatever your industry is. So how do you kind of constantly put out good content? Or do you kind of hold back and be like, you know what, not all content has to be good, like we said?
Yeah, I mean, my vision is, or my preference is like keep it focus more about the narrative and less about every post being an award winner. You know, like so if you're saying every post I'm going to be able to put that up for an award for best post. Every post I do is going to be iconic. You know, like that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. 365 days a year for like, a 5 or 10 year, band career, like let's say, that's a lot of pressure. And you will just never live up to that, So instead, like I would be focusing more on this is the narrative I want to tell and what the parts of my life that I want my followers to be a part of. After that, I think it's more about, okay, well, like this post might not have done that well, but it's part of what my journey looks like. Or, if you're playing shows in Malaysia, and maybe a bigger portion of your audience is based on the other side of the world, well, you've got to assume that like the engagement, given the times of day that you're posting, are naturally not going to sit at the perfect times to post necessarily, but it's not about that. It's about the narrative. It's about showing people that's what you're doing, accepting that maybe for a period of time, if it is opposite sides of the world in different time zones, that maybe that does, impact things. But it's, just sticking to the narrative, because like you're going to find creative spark in your life, generally speaking. And I think you should be looking for that broadly. If you're, and if you remove social media specifically from being like that's my creative outlet, that's where I think it becomes more of a lot more pressure. Do you know what I mean? Like, so if it becomes really a communication platform for a story, I'm just going to tell you guys what's happening along the way. It seriously reduces down the pressure on like how well each of those posts performs or how well they look. But people will enjoy it. So like I'm here because I want to learn more about the life of these guys. I love seeing the posts of what these guys do before their shows or after their shows. Like that's the stuff that I'm here for. So for the customer, they get to continue to see something of value, and the stuff that they were following you for in the first place. If you change it up every 3 months to completely different content, or completely different parts of the story, you will end up in a position where, you're sort of different people are like turning away from the content that you're producing because like, oh, I liked what these guys did before, but now they're just doing all this other stuff and that's not what I'm looking for. And other people who join temporarily. So it does make it harder to foster the community when you're relying so heavily on the platform, or like your social posting to provide you that creative energy. Instead, it's like, well, allow the music to be your creative outlet and you're just communicating, what you're finding in that journey.
Before we can actually get into the SEO side of things, I wanted to know from the social part, if that is one way to kind of organically grow my content and organically kind of build my online presence, how can digital marketing and Google Ads and other paid versions help me do the same thing for a band, like specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with with the latest updates that are coming through for a Bard, for example, on Google around what impact that's going to have on things. But and like for a band as well, from an SEO standpoint, like maybe not necessarily the best use in a way, in terms of search engine optimization. Is that where people are necessarily looking for their music compared to other platforms? But still, I guess like how are you able to build that exposure and things like on your website? I think it's got to be down to, how do you create, your 1,000 fans, or 1,000 raving fans, 1,000 raving customers. What do they need to see and how do you look after them? How do you get people engaged with your brand? And then, how do you tell that story? I think if you can think about those three things, it does definitely translate to like even a business, thinking about SEO. It's like, well, it shouldn't just be, oh, well, these are the keywords that I want. So here's 100 keywords that I want. So 100 pages that I want. I'm just going to talk most blandly about this different content, because that's what I've been told to do. Start thinking about if a customer that you genuinely wanted to find you on that keyword Like, what sort of stuff would they need to know, and what sort of stuff could be intertwined with I suppose the core content and the core focus on that keyword that you need to provide to for the sake of Google understanding that that's a relevant page. But what do your 1,000 fans need to see as well? Like, what sort of things can you do to help them? If you're a mortgage broker, like having interactive tools around, like, how much they can borrow, and, helping them understand, at different tiers, like what sort of borrowing capacity might look like, or helping them understand, what different banks do, or helping them understand the questions that you ask. Like, those are things that people are going to want to see. If you're a digital marketing agency like us, like we sort of talk about, it's all very well for us to show up for Digital Marketing Melbourne, and for us to be clicked on from there. But if the content is just like, a really grand attempt to just rank for the sake of ranking, then our content's going to be bland. It's going to be boring. It's not going to show any of our, Neon Treehouse, attitude, and our Neon Treehouse, voice. And, if it's just like, digital marketing is this is what it is. This is how you can get it, and this is what we can offer you. It's like people go onto that and be like, yeah, okay, super unhelpful. It was just a wall of text. I can't really do anything with that. Next page, please. So like, does the 1,000 fans get created from that content, or in and amongst creating a lot of deeper detailed content, supporting some value for, like, your relevance to that keyword, adding in extra things that help people understand why you're the best fit, helping them understand why what's different about you compared to all the other options, making sure you've got clear differentiation in there, making people feel good about, like, yourselves being the choice over others, knowing that, like, often a lot of the time on Google as well, people aren't just clicking on one item. So I've typed in Digital Marketing Melbourne. I'm only going to choose the first option. It's like, well, that's just definitely not going to be the case. I mean, that's that's an early stage keyword. Like, people might click on it. They might click on the first 6 or 7 options. So just being on page 1 is only getting you, part of the way there. You're not converting people just from being there. So you just need everything else in line as well. You need the narrative. You need, to be showing them the level of customer engagement that you traditionally have once they come on board. And yeah, that's how I'd be looking at it.
So if you could, this might be a big ask, but if you could, let's say, kind of take all of that and make it into a digital marketing campaign, the entirety of whatever technically you just said, would that technically work out as a proper strategy? And could you maybe go through it one more time as a strategy, as a proper way to, let's say, tell people how to do the step-by-step process to building that online presence with the mix of SEO and PPC?
Yeah, I think as simply as possible. I think you've just got to look at, first of all, what is your product? Second of all, what is your voice? Like, if you can really knuckle those 2 pieces down, what your architecture is going to be, around. Your product being, what are people buying? Is it ours, or is it a physical product? What are the benefits? What are the features? Like, you need to know, and what's your unique selling proposition compared to everyone else. If you can break all that stuff down, what voice do I talk in? What's my brand personality? What's my brand voice? What sorts of stuff. Those things, I think people need to get really clear on before they do anything. And then I think that in addition to those, it's about who's the audience that I'm trying to reach and what do they care about. And then understanding the consumer model of, like, decision making, from identifying a problem, collecting information, evaluating the alternatives, making a final decision, and then afterwards, do they feel good essentially about the decision that they just made? Essentially, what you're then doing is you're saying, okay, well, this is my product and this is how I talk, and I know that my customer, if I'm selling homes, I know that my customer needs a lot of information over a long time. People don't just buy a home the minute they think of one. If I sell chocolate bars, it's a different thing. But if I'm selling homes, I need to provide a lot of information. Okay, where are people looking for that information? What sorts of information are they looking for? All these sorts of questions will help you understand where you actually need to promote. So you know your product, you know your audience, and you know your voice. I understand that my audience is going to be looking often and a lot about how to buy a house, what sort of house is right for them, what sort of styles, where to buy, and so on. So you need to make sure that you have content that helps them through that journey, and not just factual stuff like a home is this, it is this. Next question. Every time that you answer a question, you've got a chance to pepper in who you are and what you do and how you benefit and other things they might not have even thought about. Hey, you've asked this question, which makes me think maybe you don't know this other question. Have you thought about that? Here's some information on that. And so essentially I'll just be looking at it as like producing content that takes people all the way through that decision-making journey from original identification through to purchase, and then working out what platforms they need to see that information on. So maybe on email, if they sign up from your website, it's just about nurturing them and letting them know that, hey, you guys are a good fit, and making sure they continue to understand why you're a trustworthy alternative, and then just sending them through, things that might help with their decision. If it's through SEO, so what questions are people asking when they're really not sure? What questions are people asking when they're right in the weeds? How do I make sure that I'm seen as a competitor to these other people, so I can get kind of in on the evaluation of alternatives for the competition? And what sort of things do they need to see from me that they're not going to find anywhere else? And so you've got to sort of think about, answering those questions at each stage. It sounds like that aligns a lot just to SEO, but actually I think that you can do that really easily on social media as well. So like, not answering every part of it, like for organic social media, you might just focus on, if someone is part of our social media community, they're probably spoken to a sales agent. They've probably gone to our display homes a couple of times, for example, checked out what our offerings like. They might have even got a quote from us around the homes that we build. So that person is part of our social media community. So we just need to provide to the audience that sits in our social media community the content that they're looking for, or the affirmation that they're looking for, or the positive reinforcement that we're a good alternative for them, at that stage. And that's the content we need to produce at that stage. For those people who have just have just purchased, like showing them content saying like, oh, look, it's a fantastic time. Like, someone else just signed, they're thrilled, or like, showing them regular content around other people who are really happy with their decision. All those sorts of things are like things that are really positive to help people feel good about, whatever stage they're at. Answering questions for people in really simple language at the very start around problem identification, so people don't feel stupid. So people feel like their question got answered, so they got guidance on what they need to do next. That's a really good user experience. Providing someone a comparison chart on how you compare, to other alternatives, or providing them everything they need to compare you to others. That's helpful. Making it really complicated and making it so that they can't get any of this information without going through a series of really complicated steps is not a good user experience. So make it feel really good to them. Speak in a voice that they understand and that they align with and they feel good about talking to, and give them the information they need at the time, and you'll understand, where your content sort of needs to sit. And after that, I think it's just a matter of research. So like, there's so many different options. I mean, let alone digital. You've got radio, you've got out of home, you've got sponsorships, you've got influencers, you've got organic social, you've got SEO, you've got email marketing, you've got automated text messages. You've got so many things under the sun, like paid ads, Google ads, Facebook ads, Pinterest ads, LinkedIn ads. Which ones are right? Like, the assumption that like, okay, you answer these 3 questions and bam, here's your 2 answers. Like, it's not so simple. But if you understand those core initial elements, and then you're researching constantly, looking at other channels that people are interacting with, you'll be able to appropriately assess whether that's an opportunity that you should think about. And then going into that experiment, I suppose, on that platform with eyes wide open, you'll be able to determine whether it was worthwhile for you. So Yeah, it's a really big question to ask, because essentially, like, a lot of the strategies that we do are so tailored and custom to the customer that we're talking to. So it's one of those things where, like, if we're not really diving deep into what they're doing and understand what platforms they've used in the past and what they've tried, was that opportunity bad because of how it was executed, or was it just a bad choice? Or was it not worth it? This other opportunity over here that they've never attempted before, but they're not really interested in, is that a missed opportunity, or is that something to just leave alone? Because it is so fragmented and there's so many different platforms. I think instead of focusing on, oh, everyone should be on Facebook, well, I tend to generally agree that a lot of social platforms and a lot of search engines are places that most people will find value in those platforms. But knowing that everyone's got a limited budget, like how much you're on them versus all the other things that you could be doing, I think it's such a tailored question. If you know those three main parts of audience, your product, and your brand, and you kind of assess them against each item, like you'll start to get a bit more of a feel for where it feels good.
So let's say I have a good understanding of my audience, brand, and my product. Can I then I know we're also kind of like running out of time, so I'll kind of quicken this up. This answer might be a bit long one, so I don't know if it's the right question to ask.
That's all right.
But if I do keep those three things in mind, and I am, let's say, a part of a band who doesn't really know too much about digital marketing, SEO, or ads, can I pretty much do the exact same thing, but then use AI to help me out throughout?
Yeah, so this is where AI is so interesting. Like, we've been sort of testing around with AI a lot, and the biggest thing that's missed with it is like genuine human voice. Yeah. So
Actually,
if you're just going to say, write me a post about this, you're going to get a post about that. But does it sound like a human wrote it? If you're a band and you're trying to really deeply connect with people, and you've got a particular sound, a particular way of speaking, people want to hear that. So I think you're reducing a lot of you out of the content that you're producing if you focus too much on AI. In saying that, though, prompts on AI platforms like ChatGPT is really where the magic is. We've seen a lot of success in essentially creating really detailed sort of like a brand style guide, like a copy style guide, which essentially provides different content formats, explaining different core parts of the business in different levels of depth. So a one-liner or a couple of words through to a short paragraph, through to a long paragraph, that sort of thing, which has sort of helped with a lot of these prompts being able to provide hey, we want to talk about this, but then use these three like short bits of information, and use these words because that's how we use it, or take the tone of voice from here and create this. If you can set up with enough time, exactly how you want your brand voice to sound, and the words that are important, and the phrases that are important, and the key messages that you always want to get out there. If you structure that all into sort of a database of info, really, I think Notion actually has some quite good ways of of storing this information. You could use AI for sure, but I think going eyes wide open is probably the key message there. Like if you're going and saying, right, I'm using it, I'm done. I've got nothing else to worry about. I just tell it questions, it answers, copy and paste up onto socials. There I go. It's just not gonna. Or I'm gonna write a script for myself. Write a script for telling people I'm coming to Sydney for a show, or tell people I'm coming to Mumbai for a show, or tell people I'm coming from New York for a show. Wherever I'm going. Writes a script, cool, and then you like go, camera, face to camera. Hello, insert people's name. I'm excited to share that I'm going to go to, people are going to be so bored by that, So I think, and like, yeah, you're getting the message across, but like, where's the voice? Like, where's the excitement? Like, yeah, I think there's so many great use cases for it. Like, honestly, so many, and it will get better for sure. But one part that is by far so underdeveloped just by nature of what it is the human element and the human authenticity in the spoken language. But like, ChatGPT, as an
Still there.
example, it's a language processing tool, right? So like if you have your own custom sort of language structuring that you want it to draw from, you will get better results. But at that point, I'm like, well, that's a lot of work to do that. Are you easier just getting into the rhythm of like speaking to camera, telling people where you are and, and what you're doing and why that's important to them, or
But let's
you
say
know
we're
what I
not
mean?
talking about the content aspect of it. Let's say we're talking about more of the process side of it. Like, let's say
Yeah.
some of the questions that I've asked you, if I put that into ChatGPT, do you have that much faith that it can give me the same kind of experienced answers?
Yeah, I mean, look, one thing I know I do is I waffle on a lot. So I say a lot in many words, or not much in many words. But I think, and I have done a lot of stuff there. In terms of like prompting for like, give me a strategy for this, give me a strategy for that, to see what sort of stuff comes out. I think top level, a lot of it's like, the thing that I always see when I see articles about how to absolutely nail this, and like, on social media, and often what I see is it says like, oh, be a thought leader. I'm like, well, that is the most unhelpful information I've ever heard in my life. Like, thought leader is essentially glorifying have an opinion. Do you know what I mean? Like, like a thought leader, you've got to think about your Gary V's, for example. He's genuinely got this platform and he's built around, this whole platform and brand around what he thinks and people caring what he thinks, which is a good thing. That's thought leader. For me to just say one day, oh, I'm a thought leader because I put a post on LinkedIn the other day about my thoughts on AI, like that's not me being a thought leader. So, and those sorts of responses I see come out of ChatGPT. Oh, like put me together a strategy for real estate agent. Oh, be a thought leader on the suburb that you're doing. It's like, okay, but you're not a thought leader. I can't just wake up
I'm
tomorrow
just
and decide I'm a thought leader.
right.
So I think like practicality is missing from it as well. And there's so many answers that you can't give unless you ask more questions. So for example, give me a strategy for this. ChatGPT will spit something out, but ChatGPT doesn't tell you. And so what's your budget? How much budget do you like? Are you really committed to this? Like, if I tell you to do something, are you actually going to do it? Because that, if you're not committed to doing stuff, then like I'm probably going to give you a bit of a different strategy if I feel like you don't have the time for it. Like, what's your time look like? What's your marketing team look like? Do you have a copywriter? Like, is someone comfortable taking videos? So it simply answers questions, and understanding that it simply answers them. It doesn't ask you anything back to make sure it gives you the right answer. It's also completely void of any sort of accountability. So remembering all these like issues with it overall, you'll get answers, and some of them will be okay. Some of them will be great.
Right.
Asking for a recipe on a really simple pasta, you'll get a very appropriate recipe out.
Yes.
Is it going to be the best? Who knows? Like, is it going to be better than a chef telling you like what a great recipe would be? No, we don't know. So yeah, you spoke about process there a bit, and that's where I would rely a little bit more on it. Like, auto responses for when you're reaching out to influencers, like as an example, wanting people to like try like talk about your music, or you wanting people to like listen to an album, or you wanting people to promote that you're in a location. Saying like, look, I don't really know exactly how to write this. I'm going to go on a ChatGPT and get ChatGPT and get a template, and then I'm going to go back over and change it so it sounds more like me. Done, great. That sort of solved the issue. If you don't know if you're opening up a restaurant and you don't know how to put a press release together to go, send it through to like a broadsheet or Good Eats or like whatever other publishing websites are out there where you can publish it to. You could use ChatGPT to say, write me a press release. Here are the details, and then go back over and make sure it got everything correct and that you feel comfortable with everything and that it's captured all the right things. Like as long as you've got that overlay, you could save a bunch of time and a bunch of money on that by using it for that purpose. It's a start.
So I think the moral of that story would be, while you can use ChatGPT for a little bit of help and research, I think the go-to is to actually go to an experienced expert on the subject and actually have a conversation with them instead. Or listen to SEO on Air, where we talk to experts in this field and you can actually get all the information you need.
Yeah, spot on. And just look over things. Again, don't assume that because you've given it to an expert or you've given it to ChatGPT, that therefore they know you more than you. You know, like even experts need to learn, more about yourself. And if you haven't related it properly the first time, you're going to get a different outcome to what you might actually need. So just looking over stuff and trusting your gut and saying, actually, thanks for this. You've done a great job, but I just don't think that you've nailed this part of my business correctly, because actually, you've mentioned that we're a coffee roaster, but we're actually not a coffee roaster. We're actually more, we do a bit of that, but we're most known for the cafe, not the coffee roasting. So I'd like to focus more on this part. Like only you can say that. Yeah.
Right. And that's where it comes back to, you have to know your brand, product, and audience.
Correct. I think my audience is going to like to hear about the cafe and that it's open until 7 p.m. Because nowhere else is open past 2 p.m. So, I want to focus on that because I think that's the opportunity here. I think that's, only you can say those things.
So thanks for having the more, what's the candid take on this podcast. It's kind of what we needed. It's a good refresh. So I hope we can get you for a podcast episode 2 and we can talk about more stuff.
Yeah, sounds good, man.
Thanks for watching that episode. I hope you enjoyed. For more videos like this, make sure you like and subscribe.